Allo, allo, it's Nia. Welcome to AI Creator World Podcast, the place where creators learn how to grow faster, build smarter, and turn artificial intelligence into real opportunity. Here, we explore powerful AI tools, content strategies, personal branding systems, and new ways to create income in the digital era. If you are building something online, you are in the right place. Let's begin.
Picture the physical mechanics of what you are doing right now, or, what you will be doing the moment you have 2 free minutes today.
Yeah, like sitting on the couch waiting for coffee, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you're standing on a crowded subway train, swaying with the commute, your thumb is just resting on the glass of your phone, and you are rhythmically swiping up.
Swipe, swipe, swipe.
Right. You're scrolling through YouTube, and in that very specific moment, you are basically a digital gladiator standing in the middle of an absolute battlefield for human attention.
It really is a battlefield. And the truly wild part about the human neurobiology here is that you're making these subconscious binding choices.
Binding choices about what you're going to dedicate, like, the next 20 minutes of your life to watching.
Right. And you are making those choices in literal milliseconds.
Milliseconds.
Yeah.
You aren't reading the video titles. You certainly aren't checking the channel names or looking at subscriber counts.
No, nobody does that. You're reacting purely on instinct to a tiny, brightly colored rectangle.
Which brings us to our topic today. Because according to the 2026 AI Creator World Team Guide that we are doing a deep dive into today, that tiny image is everything.
It really is. We're talking about an image measuring exactly 168 by 94 pixels on a standard mobile screen.
Right, and the guide says that is the single highest leverage element of an entire YouTube channel.
It's a space smaller than a physical postage stamp.
Yeah, and it dictates the entire economy of the platform, which is just insane to think about.
It genuinely is a profound realization when you stop treating it as just a piece of the interface.
And start looking at the math, right?
Exactly. Start looking at the sheer mathematical scale of it. We are talking about 15,792 pixels. That is the exact canvas you have.
That microscopic grid of light.
Yeah, and that microscopic grid is dictating the success or failure of content that might have taken a creator, 3 weeks to research.
5 days to film.
Right, and thousands of dollars in equipment to produce. It is the ultimate brutal bottleneck of the digital age.
You could have produced the visual equivalent of a masterpiece.
But if those 15,000 pixels don't fire the exact right sequence of neurons in a viewer's brain within roughly 13 milliseconds,
that masterpiece practically ceases to exist.
it does. It just vanishes into the feed.
Which is exactly why we are pulling this specific 2026 guide apart today. Now, the guide is nominally titled The 10 Best AI Thumbnail Generator Tools for YouTubers in 2026.
But we aren't just going to read a list, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
If we just sat here and read you a sterile sequential list of software features like Tool 1 does this, Tool 2 does that we would be completely missing the underlying philosophy of modern digital distribution.
We really would.
So we're going to unpack why these thumbnails matter on a deep psychological level. We're going to dissect the exact anatomy of a click-worthy image.
The actual mechanics of how colors and faces manipulate attention.
Exactly. And then, instead of just listing the AI tools, we are going to look at the specific philosophical design bottlenecks they solve.
Because whether you are trying to compete with mega channels or, you just want to get your first 100 subscribers.
The goal is to equip you to do it without needing a 4-year degree in graphic design and behavioral psychology.
And to really appreciate what this current crop of AI tools actually offers you, we have to look at the baseline reality of the platform.
Right, the historical context.
Yeah, and historically, in internet time, historically just means about 36 months ago, the barrier to entry wasn't having a 4K camera.
Or being incredibly charismatic.
No, the real, hidden, totally impenetrable barrier was the sheer number of unpaid, unglamorous hours required to learn complex, layer-based software.
Like Photoshop.
Exactly. You had incredibly brilliant, funny, insightful creators making amazing video content.
But their videos were dying silently in the search results.
Because they simply couldn't compete visually with channels that could afford to pay a dedicated graphic designer like $5,000 a month.
Right. And what this 2026 guide makes abundantly clear is that artificial intelligence has ruthlessly leveled that playing field.
It has completely democratized visual packaging.
But before we even look at how the AI works, I think we need to talk about the arena we are playing in.
The why behind it all.
Yeah. We need to talk about why YouTube, as a massive corporate entity, cares so deeply about this 168 by 94 pixel image.
We hear the term CTR thrown around all the time.
Click-through rate. But I don't want to just define it because anyone listening to this deep dive already knows what a click-through rate is. You divide clicks by impressions.
Right, that's basic math.
What I want to talk about is relative CTR and why it is the absolute god metric of the platform right now.
That is the exact right distinction to make. Relative CTR is the concept that you are never, ever existing in a vacuum.
You're always competing.
Always. When your video is served up on a viewer's homepage, it's not being judged on its own merits. It is sitting in a grid surrounded by 8 other videos.
And those other videos might be from Mr. Beast or Marquise Brownlee.
Or a massive mainstream news network. The algorithm doesn't care how many subscribers you have.
Wait, really? It doesn't factor that in?
Not in that specific moment, no. It cares about who wins the click in that highly competitive grouping.
Wow. And the guide highlights that a well-designed, psychologically optimized thumbnail can double or triple your relative CTR against those heavyweights.
Right, because YouTube's neural network isn't sitting there watching your video to see if you have great cinematic lighting.
Or a really tight, compelling narrative structure.
The algorithm is completely blind to the actual art of your video. It only watches the audience.
Okay, let's unpack this. The algorithm only watches the audience.
Exactly. The algorithm's cold, calculating logic is built entirely around session time and retention.
Because YouTube is an advertising business.
They need to keep viewers on the platform for as long as humanly possible to serve them more ads. So the algorithm measures human behavioral signals.
So if it takes your brand new video, serves the impression to 100 people in their suggested feed,
and only one person clicks on it, the algorithm makes a definitive, merciless judgment.
it says, this video is irrelevant.
Right. It immediately stops serving the impression. It buries the video.
And here is the brutal part for creators. If your thumbnail fails to secure that initial click, the actual objective quality of your video becomes completely irrelevant.
It could cure a disease, literally, but if the packaging doesn't trigger the click, no one sees it.
I always think about it like trying to sell a book.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, like you can write the greatest American novel of the 21st century. It could be a profound exploration of the human condition.
But if you bind that novel in a plain beige cardboard cover,
With the title printed in a tiny, unreadable gray font, and you stick it on a bookstore shelf right next to a thriller with a neon embossed blood red cover.
the beige book is going to sit there collecting dust until the end of time.
Exactly. The mobile YouTube feed is the most crowded bookstore on earth, and the users are sprinting down the aisles at 80 miles an hour.
If your cover is just a blurry, generic snapshot randomly pulled from the middle of your video file, you are practically guaranteeing your own failure.
Which naturally brings us to the core mechanism here.
Mm-hmm.
If relative CTR is the absolute key to satisfying the machine learning algorithm, what actually drives the biological machine?
You mean the human being?
Right. What drives the human to initiate that physical thumb tap? We have to define the perfect thumbnail based on cognitive psychology.
Before we can understand how to prompt an AI to build one for us.
So let's decode the anatomy of a click. The guy breaks this down into 3 absolute non-negotiable pillars.
Number 1 is text.
Right. It says the text needs to be bold, it needs to have extreme high contrast, and must be legible at that tiny mobile resolution.
But there is a specific rule here.
Yeah, and this is the rule from the guy that I immediately balked at. It states, as a hard rule, that you have a strict limit of 3 to 5 words.
I know, it sounds crazy.
I have to push back on that. 3 to 5 words is practically useless. If I'm doing a heavily researched 40-minute documentary-style breakdown of the complex financial derivatives that caused the 2008 housing crisis.
And you just write, house go boom.
Exactly. Throwing house go boom on the screen completely undercuts my authority. It feels reductive. It feels like cheap clickbait.
I totally understand why you feel that way. And honestly, it is the single most common point of friction for intelligent creators.
It just feels wrong.
But we have to separate clickbait from the curiosity gap.
Okay, what's the difference?
Clickbait is deception. Clickbait is promising something in the thumbnail that the video fundamentally does not deliver.
Right, like showing a celebrity who isn't even in the video.
Exactly. The curiosity gap, on the other hand, is simply the strategic withholding of information. You are falling into the classic trap of trying to summarize.
Because I work incredibly hard on my 40-minute documentary.
And your instinct is to use the thumbnail to write an abstract, to prove to the viewer that the video is smart and comprehensive.
Yes. I want them to know they're getting a deep, nuanced take.
What's fascinating here is that the psychology of the click doesn't operate on nuance. It operates on immediate, visceral intrigue.
Visceral intrigue.
Have you ever heard of George Lowenstein's information gap theory of curiosity?
I can't say that I have.
It states that curiosity happens when we feel a gap between what we know and what we want to know. The thumbnail's job is not to summarize your thesis.
Its job is to sell the click.
Exactly. The thumbnail's sole job is to pry that gap open so wide that the viewer literally cannot scroll past without resolving the tension.
So it works in tandem with the video title.
Yes, but visually it has to stand alone as a punchline to a joke the viewer hasn't heard yet.
So in the 2008 housing crisis example, instead of trying to write how CDOs caused the crash, which is a summary, I'm trying to provoke a question.
Right. And practically speaking, the physics of the screen dictate this rule anyway.
What do you mean by the physics of the screen?
Well, if you try to write a 10-word sentence, the only way to physically fit it onto a 168 by 94 pixel canvas is to drastically shrink the font size.
Oh, right.
When you shrink the font size and then that image is compressed and rendered on a phone screen, the text anti-aliasing turns the letters into a muddy gray blur.
So you literally can't read it.
The human eye simply glides right over it because it registers as texture, not information.
Wow. So every single word must fight for its life to earn its place on that image.
If you can convey the emotional core of the video in 3 words, you absolutely must cut the 4th.
Okay, when you phrase it as a physical constraint of screen resolution, the 3-word rule makes a lot more sense. It's not about dumbing the content down. It's about optimizing for the visual hardware.
Exactly.
So moving to the second pillar, faces. And not just any faces. The guide is incredibly specific here.
It notes that highly emotional facial expressions consistently, empirically outperform neutral thumbnails.
Right. Specifically surprise, intense excitement, profound curiosity, or deep concern. Faceless thumbnails, or just like a slight smile, just don't work as well.
This taps into one of the most ancient parts of our neurobiology.
Really? How so?
Humans have specialized regions in the brain, like the fusiform-faced area, dedicated entirely to recognizing faces. We are biologically hardwired to process facial expressions faster than we process text, shapes, or environments.
That makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Totally. When a viewer is scrolling in a glazed-over state, seeing a human face displaying intense emotion triggers an immediate amygdala response. We have an involuntary empathetic reflex.
So if I see you looking absolutely terrified on a thumbnail, my brain instantly demands to know what the threat is.
Yes. It creates a narrative question. Why is that person making that face?
The guide actually gives some fantastic, highly practical advice for this. It says that instead of just taking a single, slightly awkward, neutral, smiling photo at the end of your filming session.
Which is what everyone does.
Right. It says you need to actively build a personal library of micro-expressions.
Yes, this is crucial.
You sit down, set up your camera, and you take 100 photos where you are actively, ridiculously exaggerating your emotions. You want to look like a theater actor projecting to the back row.
It feels incredibly embarrassing to do, honestly.
I can imagine.
You're sitting alone in a room, widening your eyes until your sclera shows, dropping your jaw, furrowing your brow. But the data does not lie. Those hyper-expressive, high-contrast faces are what stop the thumb.
And you build that library so that months down the line, you have assets ready to go.
Right. Whether your video is about a stock market crash where you pull the intense concern asset, or a surprise tech unboxing where you pull the childlike excitement asset.
You have the exact right psychological trigger ready to deploy.
Which brings us to the third pillar, which really ties the text and the face together.
Contrast.
Yes. The guide emphasizes the need for bright, heavily saturated backgrounds paired with complementary accent colors.
But it's not just about making it look like a cartoon, right?
No, it is about actively battling the YouTube user interface itself.
Oh, that's interesting.
You have to remember that your thumbnail is going to be displayed against either YouTube's stark white light mode UI or its pitch black dark mode UI.
So if your thumbnail is mostly dark grays and blacks, it will completely camouflage into dark mode.
Exactly. And if it's mostly white and pale gray, it vanishes into light mode. You need visual pop.
High frequency, saturated colors. Vibrant yellows, deep cyans, aggressive magentas.
Colors that physically separate your image from the container it sits in.
So let's step back and look at the reality of what we've just defined. We know the exact rules of the game now.
Bold, perfectly legible, three-word text.
A perfectly extracted, surgically cut out human face showing a highly exaggerated emotion.
And both of those elements placed onto a high-contrast, perfectly balanced background using complementary color theory.
Right. But doing that manually is a nightmare. I know because I've done it.
It's so tedious.
Masking out a face with the pen tool in Photoshop, trying to get the stray hairs right.
Ugh, the hair is the worst.
Color grading the skin tones so they don't look washed out against the neon background. Calculating the exact pixel spread for a drop shadow so the text lifts off the canvas.
That is literal hours of meticulous, frustrating work for a beginner.
So how exactly are these new AI tools bridging this massive execution gap?
This is where the guide really shifts from theory to application. The AI revolution in 2026 isn't just about generative art.
It's not just typing a prompt and getting a weird painting.
Exactly. It is about solving highly specific mechanical bottlenecks in the graphic design workflow.
So what does the AI actually handle?
Well, it auto-handles the complex layout algorithms. It understands the math of color theory, instantly generating complementary palettes without you having to look up hex codes.
Wow.
It can identify the semantic difference between a foreground subject and a background environment to remove backgrounds in a single click.
And it ensures your text is readable against the specific pixels behind it.
Yes, it mathematically calculates the necessary contrast ratios. And it locks everything into that mandatory 1280 by 720 pixel dimension.
For me, here's where it gets really interesting. The most profound aspect of this isn't even the technical perfection.
What is it then?
It is the elimination of what you could call blank canvas paralysis.
Oh, absolutely.
We've all been there. You open Photoshop, you create a new 1280 by 720 document, and you just stare at this blindingly white rectangle.
It's terrifying.
The sheer overwhelming number of choices causes a cognitive overload. Where to place the subject, what font family to use, what the focal point should be.
Beginners just freeze.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What the guide points out is that these AI platforms eliminate that paralysis by providing a highly structured, data-backed starting point.
Because the AI has already ingested millions of successful thumbnails and calculated the optimal spatial layouts.
It gives you a starting point that is already 80% optimized, allowing you to just tweak the final 20% to match your specific context.
It is the ultimate cure for decision fatigue. But constraining the initial choices based on historical performance data, the AI frees the creator to focus purely on the psychological message rather than the mechanical execution.
Okay, so we have the theory, we have the psychology, and we understand the philosophical shift. Now, we are going to dive into the actual software tools the AI Creator World Guide recommends for 2026.
And we're grouping these based on specific bottlenecks.
Right. We are starting with what the guide calls the heavyweights. These are the tools for the creator who wants comprehensive control. They want to be able to do everything in one ecosystem.
The two titans here are Canva and Adobe Express.
Let's start with Canva, which is listed as Tool 1, the most universally adopted AI thumbnail maker on the market.
And its market dominance is completely earned. Canva fundamentally revolutionized the industry by taking the incredibly dense, intimidating UI of professional design software and replacing it with an intuitive, drag-and-drop web interface.
But what the 2026 guide focuses on isn't just the ease of use. It's the sheer depth of their YouTube-specific template library.
These aren't just generic flyers repurposed for video.
Right, they are built natively with YouTube-specific visual conventions and UI overlays in mind. Like leaving the bottom right corner empty so the YouTube timestamp doesn't cover your crucial text.
And their integration of AI has moved way past simple background removal.
Oh, definitely. The guide highlights their Magic Edit feature. It deeply integrates natural language processing right into the design canvas.
You don't have to hunt for stock photos anymore.
No. You can literally select the background behind your cutout face and type, replace with a blurry, neon-lit cyberpunk city street, and the generative AI simply paints it in, matching the lighting on your face.
That is just wild.
Mm.
And furthermore, if you upgrade to their Pro tier, you unlock the brand kit.
Which is huge for cross-platform creators.
Exactly. For a creator managing a YouTube channel, a TikTok, an Instagram, and a newsletter, the ability to have the AI automatically enforce your exact brand fonts and hex codes across every single platform is an absolute lifesaver.
Canva is essentially the operating system for modern digital creation. But then we have tool number 2 on the list, Adobe Express.
This is Adobe's direct, cloud-based answer to Canva.
powered by their proprietary Firefly generative AI model. Now, while it has all the standard templates and background removers, the standout feature the guide zeroes in on is its text engine.
We are talking about highly sophisticated, complex typography effects,
Gradient fills that blend multiple colors flawlessly.
intricate stroke outlines, multi-layered drop shadows, and incredibly realistic neon glows.
Which naturally makes me wonder, if Canva is universally recognized as the absolute easiest, most ubiquitous tool with a massive ecosystem, why would a beginner actively choose Adobe Express over it?
It comes down to Adobe's DNA. Adobe has a decades-long, deeply entrenched legacy in professional typography and print design.
Right, they invented a lot of these standards.
Exactly. They fundamentally understand how font rendering engines work on a mathematical level. That legacy is baked directly into the code of Adobe Express.
So it's about a specific aesthetic.
Yes. If your channel's specific aesthetic relies heavily on aggressive, popping textbody, let's say you do high-energy gaming montages.
Or intense, fast-paced sports analytics where the numbers literally need to leap off the screen.
Adobe Express is going to handle those microscopic typographic details better. It understands exactly how a drop shadow needs to blur to mimic actual physical depth perception.
It gives you a specific, slightly more aggressive visual edge that the slightly softer, more corporate-friendly Canva templates might struggle to replicate natively. That makes perfect sense. You choose a tool that matches your specific aesthetic flavor. But let's shift gears. What if you are a creator who simply does not care about the microscopic details of subpixel drop shadows?
What if your bottleneck isn't a lack of design skill, but a complete and total lack of time?
Right. What if your primary overriding priority is pure, unadulterated volume?
That is exactly where the guide pivots to a completely different philosophical approach. For the creators who need speed and automation above all else, the guide points us to Snappa, Simplified, and Relay That.
Let's look at Snappa first, which is tool 3. Snappa is fascinating because its entire value proposition is based on the intentional removal of features.
It is built purely for velocity.
The promise they make is that you can go from a completely blank canvas to a fully finished, export-ready thumbnail in under 5 minutes.
Under 5 minutes, that is almost suspiciously fast.
But the guide explains that Snappa achieves this by stripping away all the friction. There are no deeply nested menus, no complex layer masking, no intricate parameter panels to get lost in.
It is an exercise in constraint.
You drop in your background, you type your 3 words of text, you swap in your face, and you hit export. It forces you to stop overthinking and just execute.
Constraint breeds speed. But then we have tool 5, Simplified, which takes a totally different approach to solving the time bottleneck.
Instead of limiting your options, it leans entirely into large language models.
Yes, it is built for the absolute ground zero beginner. With Simplified, you don't even drag and drop to start. You use text prompts.
You literally type in the title of your video and the general vibe you want.
Like a deep dive into 1980s retro tech. Make it look neon and synthwave.
And the AI interprets that semantic intent and generates a fully laid out, ready to customize thumbnail. It acts as a translator between your idea and the graphic design execution.
That is incredible. But out of this group, the tool that absolutely blew my mind is tool 9, Relay That.
The guide officially dubs this the automation king. And I look at it differently than the other tools. When I look at the workflow for Relay That, I am not seeing a traditional graphic design tool.
What are you seeing then?
I am seeing CSS cascading style sheets for video packaging.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
In web design, you don't manually style every single page of a website. You write a master style sheet and it instantly applies those rules to thousands of pages. Relay That does this for YouTube.
You input your core brand assets exactly once.
Right. You give it your 3 brand colors, your primary and secondary fonts, and your channel logo. The AI locks those in, and then it instantaneously generates hundreds of radically different layout variations.
But they are all perfectly mathematically aligned with your exact brand identity.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategy of channel growth, the value of Relay That is immense for a very specific type of high-volume publisher.
Think about daily vloggers.
Or breaking news commentary channels, or financial analysts who have to upload a market wrap-up every single day at 4 p.m.
For those creators, spending an hour crafting a bespoke, uniquely intricate design for every single daily video is actually a massive detriment to their workflow.
Right, because for a daily channel, consistency is actually more important than isolated brilliance. You want the viewer's brain to instantly recognize your content in the subfeed without even having to read the title.
If they see your specific shade of orange and your specific bold font, their brain just registers, oh, the new daily market update is here.
Relay that automates that cognitive pattern recognition.
It builds profound visual trust through sheer consistency. But as we move through the guide, we hit another major fork in the road. Speed and volume are crucial for some, but what if your content relies heavily on the sheer, undeniable quality of the photography itself?
Or what if you belong to the massive and growing wave of creators who run their entire digital empire exclusively from a mobile phone without ever touching a desktop computer?
This is where the guide introduces a tier of tools specifically built for visual perfection and mobile-first workflows: Photor, PixArt, and PhotoRoom.
Let's start with Photor, which is tool number 4. Photor sits in a unique space because it originally built its reputation as a professional photo editing suite rather than a layout tool,
And the guide specifically highlights its AI face retouching capabilities.
which ties perfectly back to everything we discussed in the psychology section.
Right. If highly emotional, exaggerated faces are the single biggest driver of clicks, then the quality of that face matters immensely.
Photor's AI doesn't just slap a generic filter on your photo.
Yeah.
It uses precise facial mapping algorithms to identify the structural topography of your face.
It can automatically balance and brighten skin tones, mathematically sharpens specific features like the jawline or the eyebrows to increase contrast,
And even specifically target and brighten the sclera and irises of the eyes.
which ensures that when you make that face of extreme wide-eyed surprise, the emotion reads perfectly.
With crisp clarity, even when that image is shrunk down to the size of a postage stamp on a 5-inch screen. It's not about vanity, it is about readability.
Exactly. Then we look at the mobile landscape. Tool 6 is PixArt.
The guide crowns PixArt as the absolute mobile-first champion across both iOS and Android.
If your entire workflow, filming, editing, and uploading happens on a smartphone, PixArt is designed natively for that touch interface.
It also has a fascinating cultural footprint. Because it is so dominant on mobile, its massive library of stickers, effects, and templates is heavily skewed toward a very specific aesthetic.
Bold, high energy, almost chaotic.
Right. It is incredibly popular with the gaming, vlogging, and lifestyle communities because it perfectly matches the fast-paced, vibrant energy of that content.
And finally, rounding out this group, we have Tool 10, PhotoRoom. Now, the guide calls this a specialized companion tool. Its entire reputation rests on having absolutely unmatched, industry-leading AI background removal.
Now, I pushed back on this when I first read it. We literally just spent 20 minutes talking about how Canva, Adobe Express, and practically every other tool on this list has one-click AI background removal built right into their platforms.
Oh, I know, it sounds redundant.
Right. Why on earth would I deliberately add another step to my workflow, use a completely separate app like PhotoRoom, just to remove a background? It seems totally inefficient.
It seems redundant until you understand exactly how these different AI models actually process an image. This is where the deep mechanics of computer vision come into play.
Okay, tell me more.
Standard, built-in background removers generally rely on pixel contrast matching. They look for hard, mathematically obvious edges where a dark subject meets a light background.
So they're great if you take a photo of a solid geometric object against a perfectly blank white studio wall.
Exactly. But the real world is messy. The moment you introduce complex, nonlinear edges, the generic AI falls apart. Have you ever seen a YouTube thumbnail where the host has curly or frizzy hair and there's this weird, jagged, pixelated halo of the old background still stuck between their curls?
Yes. Or you see a product review thumbnail where part of a transparent glass bottle just gets accidentally deleted, or the spokes of a bicycle wheel just vanish into a blur.
It looks incredibly cheap.
It instantly signals low production value.
That haloing effect is the bane of a designer's existence. What PhotoRoom has done is train their specific neural networks not just on pixel contrast, but on deep semantic segmentation.
Deep semantic segmentation. What does that mean in plain English?
The AI actually understands that hair is a three-dimensional object comprised of thousands of individual strands that interact with light. It understands how light refracts through a transparent glass.
So it treats objects as objects, not just clusters of pixels.
Exactly. PhotoRoom handles those complex microscopic edges with surgical precision. So if your thumbnail heavily relies on a flawless, hyper-crisp cutout of a messy-haired host or a complex physical product, PhotoRoom isn't a redundant tool.
It is the absolute mandatory first stop.
Yes. You process the raw asset in PhotoRoom to get the perfect cutout, and then you import that flawless PNG into Canva to assemble the final layout.
Okay, I retract my pushback. Surgical precision on frizzy hair is definitely worth the extra 30 seconds it takes to process. It elevates the entire perceived quality of the video before they even click.
It really does.
So we are nearing the end of the top 10 list. The guide groups these final two tools as solutions for very specific niche creator needs.
The data-driven educators and the trend chasers. We are looking at Visme and Pixellead.
Let's start with Visme, Tool 7. The guide places Visme in a really interesting, slightly more technical middle ground. It sits right between the absolute simplicity of Canva and the steep learning curve of professional software like Adobe Illustrator.
It gives the user much more granular, precise control over the layout and the exact spatial relationship of the typography. But its absolute killer feature, the reason it is on this list, is its suite of integrated data visualization tools.
We are talking about custom charts, complex line graphs, data widgets, and infographics that look deeply professional.
Precisely. You have to consider the context of the audience. If you are running an educational channel, a dense financial analysis channel, or a B2B corporate strategy page, your viewers are not looking for hyper-emotional faces and neon explosions.
No, they're looking for authority, rigor, and data.
The psychology of seeing a clean, accurately rendered upward trending chart right in the thumbnail immediately implies that the video inside is backed by real research.
Visme allows you to build those authoritative, data-driven visuals directly into the thumbnail without having to generate a fake chart in Excel and screenshot it.
Which again just highlights how incredibly important contextual awareness is.
You wouldn't use a neon glitch effect PixArt gaming template with lightning bolts for a Visme-style rigorous deep dive into corporate interest rate structures.
It would create a massive cognitive dissonance for the viewer. They would assume the video is a joke.
Exactly right. Form must follow function. And that brings us to the final software, Tool 8, Pixellead. It is a robust browser-based layout tool. But what secures its spot in this 2026 guide is its unique relationship to platform trends.
YouTube design trends are not static. They evolve constantly.
A specific style of drop shadow or a certain neon color palette will become the meta for 6 months.
And then viewers will develop banner blindness to it, and the trend will shift. Pixellead's specific value proposition is that their template library is actively, aggressively updated to reflect whatever the current high-performing aesthetic trend is on the platform. They surf the meta.
The guide also points out a highly practical benefit of Pixellead. They offer a lifetime access plan.
In an era where creators are suffering from extreme subscription fatigue,
Right, paying monthly fees for their editing software, their music licensing, their analytics tools.
being able to pay once for a constantly updating thumbnail generator is a massive structural advantage for a channel's overhead costs.
But to your earlier point about trends, the best tool on this list isn't a universal truth. The AI is a phenomenally powerful engine, but it is entirely dependent on the creator's deep understanding of what their specific viewer niche actually wants to see.
Which serves as the perfect transition into the most important part of this entire deep dive, the actual execution. We have an arsenal of 10 incredible AI tools. We deeply understand the cognitive psychology of the click.
But how exactly does a beginner sit down at their desk today and execute this? What is the actual step-by-step playbook recommended by the AI Creator World team to guarantee a high-performing thumbnail in 2026?
The guide synthesizes everything into what they call the ultimate beginner workflow. It is 5 concrete, actionable steps.
Step 1. Select a template from your tool of choice that matches your channel's visual tone.
But the guide issues a stern warning here. You must treat the template purely as a starting point. Do not overthink the initial selection, because you're going to change almost every element of it anyway.
The template provides the structural scaffolding, not the finished building.
Step 2 is where the strategy happens. Add your text and visual highlights.
You apply our strict rule, 3 to 5 words of bold, high contrast, heavily formatted text, focusing purely on the value proposition. You are building the curiosity gap.
And then you add what the guide calls visual highlights. These are bright, contrasting elements like glowing arrows, red circles, or relevant emojis.
You are not just decorating the image. You are physically choreographing the viewer's eye movement, forcing their attention exactly where you want it to go.
Step 3. Enhance the face and manage the background. This is where you deploy your photo room skills.
You take your exaggerated emotional micro-expression photo. You run the AI to sharpen the eyes and map the skin tones.
You use semantic segmentation to seamlessly, surgically remove the background, ensuring no jagged halos around your hair.
And then you place that crisp, pristine cutout onto a clean, color-matched, highly saturated background so that it visibly pops off the screen.
Step 4 is the technical export, and I cannot emphasize how critical this step is. A psychologically brilliant design that is ruined by poor compression algorithms is a complete tragedy.
You must export your canvas at exactly 1280 by 720 pixels. But the guide specifically advises on file formats. You should default to using PNG format for any thumbnail that relies heavily on sharp text and clean graphic elements.
Let's expand on that because a lot of people just export as a JPEG by default and wonder why their text looks muddy.
Why is PNG so crucial for text?
It comes down to how the compression algorithms actually calculate the image data. JPEG uses a lossy compression method based on discrete cosine transforms.
Wait, discrete what now?
Discrete cosine transforms. Basically, it breaks your image into these 8 by 8 pixel blocks and essentially averages out the colors to save file space.
Okay.
When it encounters a hard mathematical edge, like a bright red letter placed directly against a solid black background, the JPEG algorithm struggles to average those drastic differences.
It creates those little blurry, muddy halos around your crisp text.
Right, those are called chroma subsampling artifacts. PNG, on the other hand, uses lossless compression. It preserves the exact mathematical pixel data of those hard edges. Your text remains razor sharp.
But the guide does offer one caveat. YouTube has a strict, hard-coded limit of 2 megabytes for thumbnail uploads.
Because PNG is lossless, the file sizes are much larger.
So if your design is incredibly complex and heavily photographic, say, a massive collage of 50 different faces and complex textures, a PNG might exceed 2 megabytes.
In that specific edge case, you have to use a high-quality JPEG to slip under the file size limit. You optimize for the sharpest possible text within the constraints of the platform.
And that brings us to the final and most philosophically challenging step of the workflow. Step 5, A/B testing.
The guide explicitly states that you must stop treating your thumbnails as finished, precious works of art, and start treating them as active scientific experiments.
YouTube Studio now has a built-in testing feature. You generate 2 completely different variations of your thumbnail.
Maybe one with a blue background and the word shocking, and another with a yellow background and the word destroyed.
You upload both, and the platform actively serves them to different segments of your audience, tracking which one drives a higher CTR.
I really want to dwell on the mindset shift this requires. Because for a lot of people, especially those who come from traditional film or art backgrounds, making a video is a deeply personal artistic endeavor.
Step 5 represents a massive, sometimes painful shift from I am an artist expressing my vision to I am a data scientist testing variables.
It absolutely raises a profound question about the role of ego in the creative process. And I will tell you, this is the exact hurdle that separates the amateurs from the professionals on YouTube.
The scientific method has to take complete precedence over your personal artistic attachment.
You might spend 2 hours meticulously crafting a complex, nuanced thumbnail that you honestly believe is a masterpiece of subtle color theory and witty, clever text.
But if you run an A/B test and a visually obnoxious bright yellow background with 3 giant red words beats your masterpiece by 5% in click-through rate.
You have to let the masterpiece die.
Wow, that hurts to hear.
I know. But the most consistently successful creators on the platform do not get emotionally attached to their graphic design. They surrender their ego to the data.
They let the audience's clicks dictate what fundamentally works.
They iterate quickly away from failure, and they relentlessly compound their successes. It is a constant, never-ending evolution driven by pure, unfeeling data.
Wow, okay. That is a heavy but necessary reality check to end the workflow on. So let's pull all of this together and recap this incredible journey we've been on.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We really did. We started by looking at a tiny 168 by 94 pixel grid of light on a smartphone screen, and we realized that those 15,000 pixels hold the literal power of life and death over your video's reach.
We broke down the sheer algorithm-dominating power of relative click-through rate.
We explore the deep neurobiology and evolutionary psychology of why a 3-word curiosity gap and an exaggerated, high-contrast human face can hijack the brain and stop a scrolling thumb in its tracks.
And we walked through how the incredible AI tools of 2026, from Canva's massive integrated generative ecosystem to Snappa's hyperfast workflow to Photoroom's deep semantic edge detection, have completely democratized the ability to achieve visual perfection on YouTube.
You no longer need a degree or a massive budget. You just need to understand the psychology, pick the right AI tool for your specific bottleneck, and ruthlessly follow the data.
It genuinely is a new era of digital creation. The barriers have been shattered. But before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering, slightly provocative idea to mull over.
Ooh, all right, what is it?
Well, it's based on the logical trajectory of everything we've just discussed. We have spent this entire massive deep dive exploring how these remarkable AI tools are making perfect, highly optimized, mathematically flawless, incredibly clickable thumbnails accessible to absolutely everyone instantly.
Right.
But let's follow that logic all the way to its natural, inevitable conclusion. If every single creator on the platform, from the 10 million subscriber giant to the kid uploading his first video from his bedroom in 2026, is suddenly pumping out flawlessly optimized, emotionally vibrant, perfectly color-graded, high-contrast thumbnails in under 5 minutes, what happens to the ecosystem next?
It's the old adage. If everyone is super, no one is. If perfection is ubiquitous, perfection is invisible.
Exactly. We are rapidly approaching an asymptote of visual optimization. When absolute flawless visual perfection becomes the baseline standard of the platform, when the perfect AI thumbnail is just the minimum cost of entry, how will you innovate to make your channel actually stand out in a sea of homogeneous AI-generated brilliance?
That is a great question. Will we hit a point of absolute viewer fatigue?
Maybe. Will we see a sudden, massive countercultural trend back toward lo-fi, deliberately unedited, blurry, raw thumbnails just to intentionally break the pattern of perfection?
Because when the algorithm is utterly flooded with flawless design, perhaps the only way to catch a human eye in the future will be to look undeniably, messily, authentically human.
It's definitely something to think about.
That is a deeply fascinating thought to take with you the next time you're standing on the subway, scrolling on your phone, swiping past thousands of those 168-pixel billboards. The game is always changing.
It never stops.
Thank you for joining us on this exhaustive deep dive into the AI Creator World Guide. Go out there, pick the tool that solves your bottleneck, build your emotion library, test your designs against the data, and most importantly, keep questioning the mechanics of what you are making. We will catch you on the next one. Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to AI Creator World Podcast. If you found this episode valuable, make sure to follow the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, and share this episode with another creator who is building their future online. For deeper guides, AI tools, and step-by-step growth strategies, visit our website at aicreatorworld.net. And remember, in the age of artificial intelligence, creators who learn faster will lead the future. See you in the next episode. Bye!